The dining room smelled like rosemary and roasted turkey, the kind of warmth that used to mean home. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding a small bottle of wine he'd picked up on the way. The table shimmered under golden light, every plate set, every glass polished except one. The space where his chair used to be was gone, replaced by a decorative candle. His father looked up from carving the turkey, his voice calm, almost casual, saying he wasn't invited this year. "It's only for family," he added, slicing through the silence as if it were nothing. The words landed harder than the cold air outside. Daniel didn't speak. He simply nodded once, setting the wine on the counter with careful precision, the same precision that had kept their lights on for years. His sister laughed at something across the table. No one looked at him. He took a slow breath, feeling the heat rise behind his ribs but letting it stay there, controlled and quiet. As he stepped out into the night, he glanced back once through the window. The laughter, the warmth, the house itself, all of it gleamed under the glow of a mortgage still paid from his account. It hadn't happened overnight. The distance crept in slowly, the way paint fades under years of sunlight. At first, it was small things. A family dinner he couldn't attend because of work, a missed call no one returned, a group chat that went silent for him but lit up for everyone else. Then birthdays came and went with no messages. Invitations were sent to others in the family but skipped over his inbox, replaced by polite excuses that sounded rehearsed. Meanwhile, the payments never stopped. Every month, a quiet transfer of money kept their world intact. $42,000 over 5 years, spread across the mortgage, medical bills, and the loan his brother Evan swore he'd pay back. Evan's photo showed up in the local paper, smiling under the headline about the family business and its promising new heir. Daniel clipped the article, not out of pride but curiosity, realizing his name had vanished from the company roster entirely. He didn't fight it, he just kept paying the bills and fixing what broke. His name was on every receipt but nowhere else. His mother would thank the boys in group texts, lumping him into a category that didn't need a face. He had become useful, not loved, necessary, not noticed. One night, after wiring another payment for a repair he hadn't been asked about, Daniel sat at his desk and stared at the confirmation email. The line that read, "Transaction successful," felt like an obituary for affection. He leaned back in his chair and let the thought settle. Somewhere along the way, money had become the only language left between them. What he once gave out of love had turned into maintenance, and what they called family had started to look more like accounting. The cold bit through his coat as Daniel stepped onto the driveway. The laughter from inside drifted through the window cracks, warm and distant, a sound that used to feel like home. Now it was just noise behind glass. Snow had started to fall, soft flakes catching the porch light, covering the walkway he once shoveled for his parents every winter. He stood there for a long moment, his breath visible in the dark, then pulled out his phone. The banking app opened with a familiar blue glow. His eyes traced the list of automatic payments stacked one after another. Mortgage, gas, taxes, insurance, $42,000 in quiet obedience. It hit him how every transaction was another line of silence, another month of disappearing. The same loyalty that once made him proud had turned into a kind of erasure. His thumb hovered over the cancel button, and for the first time, he didn't feel guilty. He thought of his father's voice at the table, calm and dismissive. He thought of the missing chair. The humiliation had settled into something sharper, but steadier. As he pressed his thumb down, there was no anger, only clarity. The screen blinked, confirming the action. The snow fell heavier, wrapping the street in quiet. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and let out a slow breath. He wasn't cutting them off. He was reclaiming his name from every unpaid thank you. The first payment that bounced was the heating bill. Then the gas account flagged overdue. By the third week, the city sent a reminder about property taxes, printed in bold red letters. Daniel saw each notice appear in his email inbox, not with panic, but with quiet observation. He had turned off autopay, but not responsibility. He had simply handed it back to its rightful owners. For years he had covered the cost of their comfort, and now the silence in his account was the cleanest line of boundaries he had ever drawn. The temperature dropped below freezing that weekend. He imagined the draft that used to slip through the family's old window frames. The living room where his mother watched holiday movies must have felt colder than usual. The phone started buzzing that night. First a text from his sister asking if the heat was acting up again, then a voicemail from his father about the credit card limit being reached, another from his mother, her voice trembling between pride and plea, asking if he could check the payments one last time. Daniel sat in his apartment, the radiator humming steadily behind him. The warmth filled the small space with a kind of peace he had never felt at their larger house. He made dinner slowly, stirring the pot while the phone vibrated on the counter. Every buzz was a sound of dependency breaking apart. He didn't block them. He didn't reply either. He just let the silence grow roots. The next morning, frost climbed across his parents' windows while sunlight poured into Daniel's kitchen. It wasn't vengeance. It was balance returning to its place. He finally understood that justice doesn't always arrive with punishment. Sometimes it arrives with quiet. Sometimes the only way to fix what's broken is to stop fixing it. They showed up on a Sunday morning, just after the snow had started to melt. Frost clung to their coats, and their breaths came out in white clouds. His mother stood at the front, clutching a manila envelope, while his father hung back, trying to smile as if nothing had happened. Daniel opened the door halfway, letting the cold air slip in, but not inviting them inside. His mother's hand trembled as she pulled out the paper. It was from the family lawyer, a formal notice that he had been reinstated in the will. Her voice cracked as she explained it, saying it was their way of making things right. Daniel studied her face, then the paper, then his father's eyes that refused to meet his. He asked quietly whether they were here for forgiveness or access. The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. His father started to speak, but faltered. Daniel reached for a folder on the table and handed it to him. Inside was a printed repair estimate for the heating system, totaling $1,900. He told them this time he would bill it properly. His mother blinked, confused. His father's jaw tightened. Daniel kept his tone calm, almost gentle. There was no anger left, only precision. He explained that boundaries are just contracts written in emotional ink. If they wanted the warmth back, they could start by paying for it like adults. He closed the door slowly after they left, not to shut them out, but to keep the peace inside. The restaurant was quiet when Daniel arrived. Bellevue's private dining room glowed under warm amber lights, the kind used for celebrations. He placed 4 envelopes on the table, one for each seat. Inside each was a record of what he had paid over the years. The mortgage transfer of $14,200, the $9,000 business loan that vanished into his brother's failed startup, the $6,800 in medical bills, the $12,000 for home repairs. He lined them up carefully, each paper folded like a receipt for a version of himself he no longer owed them. When the door opened, the smell of perfume and winter air filled the room. His parents entered first, then Evan trailing behind, quieter than usual. They hesitated at the sight of the envelopes. His mother tried to smile, asking if this was some kind of family dinner. Daniel told her it was a closing. His father frowned, reaching for one of the envelopes, pulling out the papers inside. The color drained from his face. He asked if this was meant to shame them. Daniel said no, it was meant to balance the account. He took out a small black key from his pocket and set it in the center of the table. It was the spare key to the family home. He told them the locks had been changed and that the property was now fully theirs to maintain. His mother's hand shook. His brother's eyes dropped to the table. No one spoke. The candles flickered in the low light, their reflection trembling across the glassware. Daniel straightened his jacket, thanked them for coming, and turned toward the door. The room stayed silent behind him. As he stepped into the hall, he felt lighter, as if the weight of every unpaid thank you had finally lifted. The last thing he heard was the faint sound of a candle sputtering out. A year later, Daniel's life moved at a quieter pace. He ran a small financial consulting firm in a renovated office downtown, helping veterans and single parents rebuild their credit and protect their savings. The walls were simple, lined with light wood shelves and one framed phrase in bold letters: "Silence is not weakness, it's proof you've outgrown the noise." Clients often asked what it meant, and Daniel would smile, saying it was about learning when to stop paying for peace that never came. The business grew slowly but honestly, the kind of growth that didn't need applause. On a December afternoon, a holiday card arrived in a red envelope with familiar handwriting. Inside were short messages from his family, polite and warm, signed with hope that he'd come by for dinner. He read it once, then set it aside without resentment. Some things no longer needed a response. He turned off the lights in his office and stepped outside. The street was quiet, lined with warm storefronts and a few people rushing home through the snow. He slipped his hands into his pockets and walked beneath the street lights, their glow soft against the falling flakes. The air was cold, but it felt clean. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for approval or apologies. Peace, he realized, wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of boundaries. And family, in the end, was anyone who respected them.